Hello, this is Joe Trahan, welcoming you to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, whose mission is to enlighten the world to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances. As the national leader on this subject, they communicate their educational messages through various methods, including this podcast. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our All Me podcast. I am Brian Parker, the Director of Education for the Taylor Hooton Foundation, as well as your host for today's episode. I'm looking forward to this one because we are taking our show international. If you guys follow our work here at the Taylor Hooton Foundation, you will probably notice that most of our programs and education take place right here in the United States. But that definitely doesn't mean that appearance and performance-enhancing substances aren't used worldwide. The desire to achieve your physical goals creates pressures that are universal. So today we'll be heading to Finland to talk with Hanna-Kaisa Jussila from Doppinglinkki. Doppinglinkki is a health organization based in Finland to help those that encounter or want to learn more about doping substances in their country. Their focus is on the everyday person that might encounter these substances, not on the usage in professional sports. Therefore, they have a really good insight into the depth and scope of the doping landscape in their country. In this episode, we're going to learn more about that landscape and the issues that they're seeing in Finland. How do those issues compare with what we see here in the United States? What substances are they seeing being used there? Why are there people getting involved? What kind of supplement usage are they seeing? And ultimately, how are they using education, just like we are, to spread much needed information in the area of appearance and performance enhancing substances? So let's head to Finland and bring Hanna-Kaisa into the show to learn more. Hanna-Kaisa, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for spending some time with us today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Of course, this is really exciting. I believe you're our first international guest, at least the first one that I've interviewed. It's not going to take listeners to very long to pick up on your accent and know that as well. For me, this is really cool because I think we are 7 hours apart. So for me, I'm sitting here drinking coffee and getting my day going. It's almost happy hour for you guys over there. So it's pretty cool to have these schedules line up and spend some time together. Thanks for getting this organized and getting our schedules lined up so we can hang out with each other. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's really great to be able to, I'm very excited about having this option, this possibility to discuss with you as well.
It's going to be great. It's going to be a lot of interesting information, and I know there's a lot of overlap with the work that we do, so I'm excited for our listeners to learn more about it. I want to spend most of our time today learning about Doppinglinkki and the organization that you work for. I also want to spend a lot of time kind of comparing and contrasting the doping issues that we have in our country as well as your country. But before we do that, let's at least learn a little bit about you. So tell us a little bit about your background. How did you get into the field of anti-doping, and what was your career path kind of leading up to what you do now with Doppinglinkki?
There were some twists and turns before I entered the field of anti-doping work. Originally, I'm a Bachelor of Business Administration. I worked for several years in communication and administration in the fields of environment and forests, actually. And then I did my master's in sociology. And then after working on some other addiction prevention projects, I found myself working at Doppinglinkki. And then actually the sociologist in me is very happy to be working here, as a lot of the reasons for using doping substances are rooted in society. So, the values we hold as a society, the body image issues, the stigma, etc. So it's a very interesting place for me to be working in.
Yeah, it's always funny how we end up where we do, right? It's rarely is it planned out for us. You're kind of like me. I didn't study this field when I was in school. I was working in baseball and a few other different things before I hopped into it, but the world has taken us here, and I think we're both grateful for that. So that's good to know your background a little bit. Now that you've kind of mentioned Doppinglinkki, let's talk about that a little bit. In the introduction, I gave our listeners a little bit of background on what you guys do, but you're going to be able to explain it much better than I did. So give our listeners some insight into the Doppinglinkki organization. How was it formed? How was it funded? And ultimately, at the end of the day, what is its purpose?
Actually, we have our 10th anniversary this year. Doppinglinkki was founded just a bit over 10 years ago. when the Minister of Education and Culture of the time raised the issue that fitness doping was becoming more popular and then a possible risk to public health. And then what started as a short project has by now established itself as one of the two main anti-doping organizations in Finland. And funding-wise, we are a non-profit organization. We get our funding from the Ministry of Education and Culture and from the Funding Center for Social Welfare and Health Organizations, which funds most of the similar organizations here in Finland. We're part of the A-Clinic Foundation, which has done substance abuse prevention and treatment, as well as mental health work since 1955. So there's a long history and lots of experience of different addictions. So it's a good place for Doppinglinkki to be in. And then currently we're a team of 5 people, but not all full-time. And we also work part-time in EU-funded projects in the field of doping substance use prevention and education and research. And we're the only organization in the whole country doing this. So there's enough for us to do. And we do find that it's very important for us to cooperate with our international colleagues, such as the Taylor Hooton Foundation, and so, to keep track of the latest research and to be able to provide reliable and up-to-date information to our target audiences. And then, the purpose of our work is that we're trying to prevent doping substance use, and we do that by providing information and expert advice on doping issues. So our services are not only intended for people who use doping substances themselves, but also for their loved ones and for all the different professionals who meet users of doping substances in their work. And what we hold most closest to heart is that we don't moralize use, we don't judge, and we offer low threshold services, and it's all free of charge.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's really amazing that, on a national level, you guys saw this growing health issue and you really did something about it on the national level, and you put together an organization, you provided resources to, like you said, have an outlet. I think that's one of the things we've been searching for over here is some kind of centralized national outlet for people that are dealing with a lot of these issues. Your backstory is a little bit similar to ours in the fact that when everything happened to us and Taylor, we saw that, hey, look, this is a national health issue, and we formed our foundation to try to do something about it, right? To try to spread that message education. You guys are doing the same thing, just on a kind of a centralized government level, which is a really cool thing. And I know you also mentioned the A-Clinic Foundation, who's a part of this. I will put a link to that in the show notes so our listeners can learn a little more about their backstory and how this whole blanket organization works together to meet those goals. That's a really cool thing. Now, speaking of what you guys do, let's focus in on you a little bit. I want to learn more about what your roles are there at Doppinglinkki. So let's do this. Let's say if you and I switched places for a day and I went to work for Doppinglinkki, which I would love to do, because then that means I get a trip to Finland out of it, which would be cool. But tell me what a typical day would look like if I was in your shoes. What do you work on let's say just an average day over there?
Well, I have to say that now with the COVID-19 situation still going on, we mainly work from home. So you would be able to see my house. So okay. Communication with the team is quite different now as well. We all basically work remotely. And that, of course, has changed how you work. It's mostly team chatting in the Teams app. And then, my tasks vary from communication activities to budgeting, and then, from project management to developing the Doppinglinkki website. So because we're such a small team, we do pretty much everything ourselves. So one day we're the marketing department, and the other day the healthcare advice team, and the days are quite different. And sure. Now with the current situation, we do a lot of online communication activities, just try to move all our services online. For example, some of our trainings are now web-based instead of face-to-face. And then normally we would have stands in expositions and fairs to reach professionals, but that's now on hold. So we have to find new ways to reach people just by, calling them and, you have the same issues. And then, there's one super interesting thing that I want to mention, that we held our first online peer support group for people who want to stop using doping substances just this spring. And we'll definitely organize the group again, because we saw that there's a need for discussion in a safe environment. That was something that we could definitely do even under in the situation we're in.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's I'm glad to hear that you guys not only put that together, but also people took part of it, and there's interest in doing it again, which is really cool. The more I talk with you, the more I realize how similar a lot of the work that we do is, right? Because, a few things you mentioned. Number one, you guys talk on Microsoft Teams. That's the exact same thing I do with my team every day. Number two, you guys are really small. I think you said you maybe have 5 employees. We have about 5 employees, and we all wear a different hat every single day. One day we're the HR department, one day we're the tech department. It's a hard question for me to answer, so I'm sure it was for you, because every single day looks a little bit different. And also, just like you, we've been doing a lot of virtual learning and resources and education as well. So there's more and more similarities the more that we learn kind of what your role is and what you guys do, which is cool. Now, transitioning a little bit deeper into the demographic that you guys work with on a daily basis. I know you've kind of touched on this already, but knowing a bit more about the work that you guys do, I believe that Doppinglinkki's focus is on the everyday person that gets involved with doping and family members that are looking for information about doping. So this is not necessarily about doping in competition, because I believe you have a different organization in Finland that focuses just on that. So in my opinion, I think that foresight to focus on both groups is really important, because as we know here in the U.S., most of doping substance users are non-athletes. They're typically driven by body image and other external pressures. So is that also the case in Finland? Is that why it was important for you guys to start this second group, because you were seeing a lot of people get involved with these substances because of reasons like body image?
Yes, that's definitely the case. The majority of doping substance users are non-athletes in here as well. And I guess the motivations for use are pretty much the same as theirs, so that they range from gaining more physical power to just image enhancing. And then there are certain jobs where, looking big is an asset. And you mentioned the other organization that in Finland we cooperate with the Finnish anti-doping organization, FinSys. But while they focus on the professional ones and make sure that they, follow the WADA regulations and rules, then our focus is entirely on the non-athletes. And we make that very clear to people who contact us, that we don't respond to questions of professional athletes, to make sure that, because the rules are different there.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll put a link in the notes to FinSys so you can learn more about the anti-doping organization you guys have in regards to athletes. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we deal with the same thing. In fact, when I go into a school and I say, here's what our topic is, I make sure that, the entire student population is there. I make sure people know that, look, doesn't matter if you're an athlete or not. All of us face this human pressure, this common human pressure of body image. I think that's a very natural thing that applies to all of us, regardless of who you are and where you live. And sometimes that pressure can drive us to do things that we shouldn't do. So I think that it's important for people to know that, that's the main reason people are getting involved. And I think it's great that you guys have a focus on that, because we know that that's the case here. And it's, not surprising to learn that that's a similar situation on your side as well. One way we could further compare our situations is through numbers, but I also know that, look, getting accurate numbers on issues and users like this can be a challenge, but let's try. Let's take something like anabolic steroids, for example. Here's what the numbers over here will tell us. And from what we've seen, it's about 7% of our young people have tried anabolic steroids at some point in their life. That equals out to, let's say, around 2 million of our students have gotten involved with these drugs to some capacity. As a whole, on your end, Do you guys have any studies? Do you have any numbers on what percentage of Finland's population is using these substances? And if you do, is there a certain age or demographic that you see getting used the most? What kind of numbers do you have over there?
Well, actually, we're in the very lucky situation in that regard, because there's a drug-related population survey in Finland that's done every 4 years. And for the past 12 years, it has included questions about doping substances. And according to the survey, about 1% of adults has used doping substances, at least at some point in their life. And the number has remained pretty much the same for the past 12 years. Whereas, for example, in the other Nordic countries, the number or the percentages have been bigger. So, yeah, it's a very good survey.
Yeah.
For
do
us.
you any opinions on? Sorry, any opinions on why that? Why do you think in Finland that number has stayed the same where it has gone up in other countries? Is it because you have resources such as yourself for education? Why do you think that is?
I'd like to say that it's because we exist.
Sure.
No,
yeah.
Maybe it's just that we have the population survey itself. It's so, well, it's a bit more specific. I don't know if the other countries have similar reports, or at least they don't go that far into the history.
Sure.
And then it's you asked about the demographics. So it's estimated that the users are most often 20 to 40-year-old men, and not so many women are reportedly using. But then again, women, I guess there's the stigma issue is bigger. Like admitting use is even harder for women.
Sure. Yeah, it's I in our country, I would say males still make up the majority of users, but saying that, females is the fastest growing user group, and that's just because body image, as we have said, is universal, right? And sometimes I think females have even more body image pressure than males do, and so they're using substances driven for that reason. But look, I'm with you. I think it's great that your number has stayed somewhat, flat over the years. I know we kind of sounded like we were joking about it. I do think the fact that you guys exist has something to do with that. I mean, we have always said that education is the best solution to prevention, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on how you guys do that. But if there's information about what this stuff is and the dangers that are involved with it, and most of your country knows about that, I think that's a great deterrent. I mean, that's a really great resource that you guys have that I do think would help keep your numbers down. So, I know it's hard to want to take that credit all by yourself, but I certainly think that it plays a role. I mean, we believe that education makes a big impact. So I applaud you guys for doing that. Now, let's move from how many people are involved to what they are using, because I know on this podcast we're saying doping substances a lot, but you and I both know that's a very broad term. There's a lot of different products that fall into that category. Now over here, we're seeing a rise in popularity in a few different substances, one of which is SARMs, selective androgen receptor modules. We're seeing that usage really starting to creep up a lot lately. I'm curious what is getting popular there. Are you seeing specific doping substances getting more and more popular there? What are you seeing get used the most on a daily basis in Finland?
Well, we cooperate with the Finnish customs as well, and according to their latest reports of seizures, the most popular substances are anabolic steroids. Well, obviously, about 90% of them are anabolic steroids, like stanozolol and oxandrolone were at the top of the list in 2018. And then there's, of course, testosterone in different forms, growth hormones. But we've also recently gotten a lot of questions about SARMs and their legality and safety. So that's definitely something that's maybe just bubbling under. People do try to find new ways to get results. And then, of course, the seizures that the customs make only make up for a small part of what's actually moving in the country, what's being used. But it gives some indication of the most popular products.
Sure, yeah, and anabolic steroids, some of the ones that have been around forever are still being used a lot here, and Winstrol and Ebol, and some of the ones you mentioned, I think those may maybe around for good, as they've been proven to be pretty powerful stuff. But you mentioned, those are the kind of things moving around in your country. I want to learn a little bit more about how are they moving around in your country, right? So give you an example. In the U.S., a lot of people are surprised to learn that many of our users are buying their substances online and getting it shipped straight to their house. That's how a lot of our young people even get their hands on this stuff. They get whatever they want and they order it online and it's shipped straight to their house in an unmarked cardboard box and nobody ever knows what it is, right? So it's making a lot of the stuff that we're talking about more accessible than it's ever been before. Is that also the case in Finland? How are your people getting their hands on the stuff that they want to use?
Yeah, that's definitely the case in Finland as well. People order them online, both from abroad and from within Finland, and a lot of it is bought via the darknet. And actually, well, that's not maybe the darknet issue, but we've found out that actually the most common countries of origin for doping substances have recently been Poland and the US. And then obviously these numbers only make for the tip of the iceberg, as the majority of substances isn't caught by customs or police. But yeah, ordering stuff online is very popular and easy. Whereas we have some colleagues in the Netherlands, I think, who said that a lot of the stuff is still being sold in gyms, but that's not really reported here. I mean, of course it happens, but it's not the most normal way.
Yeah, the internet, I always tell people the internet is a wonderful thing at times and it's a terrible thing at times, right? I mean, online shopping has now gone all the way down to illegal drugs, basically, right? So I had a feeling the World Wide Web was also being your major source there, but I was curious to know if that was the case. I also think it's interesting to know that a lot of your drugs are coming from our country, because we have a lot of our drugs coming from Asia and overseas as well. So everything's getting shipped everywhere. And like you said, it's just very hard to track it all down and stop it. And that's why I think it's important that another reason that we educate is because I've always said to parents and anyone listening that our students can get their hands on stuff, right? It doesn't matter what town you live in or how remote you think you are. Money in mailboxes is almost all you need right now, which is scary to think about, but it's also very true. Another thing I want to ask you about, because it's just something that we get tons of questions about, and one of the things we educate on here is dietary supplements. And I know we both do education in that area, so I'm curious to know a little bit how your situation is with that. Over here, dietary supplements are incredibly popular. I mean, I know that they're popular worldwide. Last I checked, this was over a $40 billion industry with thousands and thousands of different products. So I know, again, this can be hard to put exact numbers on it, but what is the scale of dietary supplement use in your country? Are you seeing this stuff used a lot? What kind of stuff are you seeing being used? Is it just as popular there as it is over here?
Yes, they're very popular in here as well and sold pretty much everywhere you go. Regular supermarkets, even not only the pharmacies, but just everywhere. And then I checked that according to a recent survey, more than 50% of adults or even more than 60% of women use them regularly. I mean, it can be either vitamins or herbal supplements or then, the protein bars, or then the so-called testo boosters that are even sold in pharmacies here. And of course, most of this stuff is basically harmless and there's no need for us to demonize them. But at the same time, we do try to remind people that very few of these products are actually necessary for you if you have a balanced diet, and that especially if you buy the stuff online, then there are risks involved.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you sound kind of like how we sound when we go out and talk about supplements. We it's the same thing. We tell people, look, this is not about condemning supplements. Majority of supplements out there are fine and good, clean products and coming from good, reputable companies. But, there is a risk, especially with certain categories of things that people need to be aware of. And like you said, it's making people think about why they're taking supplements, right? If you're properly fueling yourself and you're active and have a balanced diet, like you said, do you really need a lot of this stuff, right? So why are you taking this stuff? Again, just getting people to be smart about what they're doing. Because one of the things that we educate on when it comes to supplements, here in the U.S. is some of the regulation issues that we have, right? It's important to know what you're putting into your body, because the way it works over here is, most of the supplements that you buy, there's no required testing. When things hit the shelf, they didn't necessarily have to be tested. So it's important for you to know what it is that you're putting inside of your body. How does the regulation work there in Finland? Is it also the case? What are the regulations there? Is there some lack of regulation? And then ultimately, how do you know what's good and clean? How do you find the good stuff if you are taking supplements?
It sounds like we have a very similar situation as you there in the US, because in here as well, unlike medicines, supplements aren't monitored that closely in here. So they're basically sold and monitored just as any regular food stuff. And so there's no pre-marketing control, but then, you aren't allowed to make like wild health claims about them. Mm-hmm. But still, like any testing or inspecting is done only after the products have entered the market, and only if and when there are problems or there's like actual doubts about their safety, and then maybe it's a bit too late at that point. Mm-hmm. So we do try to, again, like inform people to be wary of buying the stuff online, because the lack of monitoring means that there can be issues with contamination, or you don't know how much of the stuff is in there, and there can be some problems if you're taking some medication together with the supplement. So yeah, a lot of risks in that regard. And we do try to remind our followers that if the promises of the supplements sound too good to be true, then they probably are. Sure. And they might be contain something that they shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the exact same situation that we have, right? And you can't, any supplement claiming they can cure or treat a disease. I mean, there's lots of red flags. That's kind of what I tell people is like, look, you can't walk into health food stores and assume everything is healthy and good for you, or even worth your money, right? So it's very similar situations. In our country, we have a couple third-party independent testing resources. Our favorite of which is NSF Certified for Sport. I'm not sure if you're aware of them, but that's kind of what we pass along to people in regards to finding good, clean supplements. Do you guys have any kind of resource there that does kind of any independent testing, or is it kind of just up to the user to look at the ingredients and know what it is that they're taking? Over here, we don't necessarily tell people not to use supplements, but we do say if you're going to, make sure they're certified, make sure they're tested. There's several different groups that do supplement testing. If they're independent.
There isn't any. Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find out quickly. Google what's the organization? What is it? What's it? The word in English that does some sort of testing here, but then because we don't really have that.
Yeah.
Here.
Okay. Yeah, that's that makes it even harder, right? And to be smart about what you're doing, right? Because there's always going to be a little bit of risk, because like you said, if they're not monitored and not tested, there's always some risk in taking supplements. So like you said at the very beginning, the bigger question is, do you need it, right? Are you getting what you need through your diet and exercise and food? If you are, that's going to be your safest option, just because there's always going to be a little bit of risk when it comes to supplements. And we face the same exact thing here. Let's go back a little bit more towards the anabolic steroid and the direct doping substances topic that we talked about before. I was reading through your website a little bit more before you and I started talking, and I was reading kind of more about the laws that you have in regards to this in Finland. And correct me if I'm wrong, but looking at it, it looks like, obviously, if you manufacture, if you import, if you sell these drugs, that is illegal. That is against the law, and that, of course, makes sense. But if you are an average person that is taking this stuff for personal use of doping substances, from what I saw, it looks like that is not illegal, right? Am I correct when it comes to that in your country? Give us some insight into how the law is set up there when it comes to doping substances.
Yeah, I bet that may seem a bit weird, and it's a very interesting topic. And in the Finnish legislation on doping substances was actually reformed in 2002. And then the penal practices were changed as well at the time. And then when they did the reform, the goal was to focus on stopping the importation and sale of large quantities of doping substances. So the use of doping substances itself wasn't criminalized. And that it was based on a few ideas. That firstly, that Finland has this well-established criminal law principle according to which if you're like only endangering your own health, then it's not covered by criminal law regulation. And then there was also the thinking behind it that doping substances had a like lower health effects and a lower risk of addiction than other illegal drugs. And then they in general thought that in general drugs are like other illegal drugs are associated with more other crime than doping substances, but well, that's another discussion. But then there was also the concern that if you made using doping substances illegal, then it would make it more difficult for users to seek help. And Finland is actually the only Nordic country where personal use isn't criminalized. And the sanctions are also slightly lighter here in Finland. But I think maybe that's because the reform was done a bit, like if the reform was done earlier, then the law might be stricter. In fact, Finland has then quite strict sanctions on other drug use and possession. So this is sort of an anomaly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's, I've never thought about it that way. I mean, look, you can't argue with the numbers, like you said before. If your percentage rate is low, it may not be as stigmatized to, like you said, ask for help and look for resources because you're not scared of breaking the law or necessarily getting in trouble. So there probably is part of that I do understand the mindset behind that. But then on the other side of the coin, let me know your opinion on this, right? Let's say that we do have someone there in Finland that's a non-athlete that just wants to use this stuff, for whatever fitness reasons, whatever it may be. They're not worried about suspension or getting kicked off a team because they're not a competitive athlete, right? So they're not really at risk of legal trouble if they are going to use this stuff. But you and I both know that these are dangerous drugs at the same time. So how do we prevent them from using this stuff? And ultimately, is that what you guys do? Is that what prompts them to turn to you for information? What deterrent do they have? If they're not going to get in legal trouble, what's to stop them from doing it?
And unfortunately, one of the main reasons why people contact us, doping substance users, that is that they notice side effects. So they might have some issues with reproductive health or gynecomastia or cardiac problems or mental problems or you name it. So this is where we come in with information and advice on where to get help. Because people do have a lot of questions and concerns, and whether it's the users themselves or their loved ones or the professionals. We get approximately like 50 to 100 questions per year through different channels. And that's actually one of our main services that we offer, but it's only in Finnish. So you can find it on our website in English, is that we have an online advisory service. So it's available in Finnish and Swedish, and we've had it since the beginning of the Doppinglinkki. It was modeled after similar advisory services of the Clinic Foundation. Again, anonymous, it's free of charge. And then there's the non-judgmental way of doing it. And we have several experts from different fields answering questions that people send us. Then that's something that we really, it's quite unique in Finland. And we're also excited about a new service we started last autumn. We established a similar service in the darknet. So it's the same place where people buy the drugs or the doping substances and where they advise each other. But now we have our own Doppinglinkki thread in the darknet. And that's been very well received. And that's where we really get the information to the people who need it. So that's something that we really want to continue doing.
Sure. Yeah. Go direct to where your users are. That makes sense. I mean, I figured that would be your answer is, at the end of the day, the best deterrent is education. We've kind of already touched on that before, but, these can be dangerous drugs. And I'm glad that the people in your country have somewhere to turn and to get that education, because ultimately that's really how we prevent a lot of the usage, is for people to be aware of what can happen if you get involved. So, I'm happy to hear all the different resources that you guys have to help make that happen. And you've mentioned your website. I'll put a link to your website in the show notes as well, because I encourage anybody listening to go check that out and learn a little bit more about your resources and what you guys do. Are there any other resources on your website or social media that you guys use to spread awareness? What other tools do you guys have for education? Are you guys, I know you're not doing it right now, but do you go out and you do any kind of in-person education and meetings and stuff like that? Anything else that we haven't touched on that you guys do to help spread that message?
Yes, definitely. We've invested a lot, like more and more in education. But like you said, it's the best remedy here, especially when it comes to people who are not using it. So in addition to the online material, we also train groups in person. My colleagues have trained, given lectures to people in the fitness industry, in hospitals, to healthcare center workers. They've trained the people in the Finnish Police Academy, and needle exchange clinics, PE teachers, you name it. The list is long, but because there's so many different fields where you need to be aware of the doping substances. And then, as we have a small team, so it's quite time consuming to travel. So we now also offer these virtual lectures, which, like the pandemic, has obviously increased demand for these as well. And then we offer, at the moment, we have 4 different online courses about fitness doping. One for the fitness sector, 2 for different healthcare professionals, and then 1 for the security sector. And also we have a learning material package that's aimed at 13 to 19-year-olds that can be taught at school in health education classes. So that's the education part. But then in addition to that, we also try to really make sure that the fitness industry is aware and is we try to make sure that the fitness industry is aware of the problem. So one major part of our work is the clean fitness commitment for fitness centers and professionals. So we have about almost 800 members already who have pledged to be clean, and then they get this sticker and certificate to show for it. So the idea is that we emphasize the clean and healthy ways to stay in shape, because doping is, like a 4-letter word to a lot of people in the fitness field. So we try to find other ways to speak about these themes while also making people aware of the risks. So more health promotion and less anti-doping talk. And we found that seems to work as well.
Yeah, it's really amazing having talked with you to really see the similarities in what you guys do and what we do. That education that you guys do is really so important, but also, like you just mentioned, the way you educate is so important as well. That's kind of always been our approach, is to never sit down with a group of people and just condemn behavior and just tell people, hey, don't do this. What you're doing is wrong. It's at the end of the day, you just want to get them the tools and the resources they need to make the right healthy choices, right? I've always said it's just as important as how you're saying it as what you're saying. And I think that your approach on that is spot on. It's something we've always been very conscious of, is how are you getting across your message, because that's what's ultimately going to make that impact. And the other big similarity that you just touched on, which is tremendous overlap, is the pledge for those that are committing to live clean. We have the very same exact thing. It's called our All Me League. We have several different professional athletes that are involved as spokespeople, but it's a way that we can inspire people to achieve their goals the right way, because ultimately that's what it's all about. It's not just about telling people what not to do. It's also showing them that whatever you want to do, you can get there and you can do it the right way. So we have the same thing. It's called our All Me League, and I'll put the notes to that website as well in the show notes. But it allows people to go on there, take a pledge to live and compete, PED-free, and then again, they become a role model. We have a positive conversation about this instead of a negative one. So the overlap here has been tremendous to learn about, and I really applaud you guys for all of the education and the resources that you guys provide. I'll put notes to all of this in the show notes for everybody to go check it out. I really encourage anybody listening to go learn more about Doppinglinkki. It's really a fascinating organization, one that I think even more and more countries should adopt if it's possible, because I know the tremendous work that you guys do on a daily basis, and we applaud you for that. It's just really important resources that you guys have. Last thing before I let you go, and I know that this is coming a little bit, right? But it's curveball question time. These are not going to be hard. Okay, I got a couple easy ones for you, but I want to ask you a couple questions to learn more about you. Has nothing to do with doping. I didn't send you these beforehand. Just a couple fun things to wrap this thing up with, right? And since you are our first international guest, at least my first one, my questions, honestly, they just come from my own curiosity of Finland. It's a place that I would love to visit, so I want to learn a little bit more about it from someone that lives there, all right? So here's your 2 questions, and here's your first one. if I was going to come visit you in Finland, where is the first place you're going to take me? What is something that I have to see if I make my first trip overseas to visit you?
I would take you to lakeside sauna. It's not mixed sauna and you can wear a towel, but you would definitely have to take a dip in one of the beautiful lakes in Finland.
That sounds amazing. In my mind, I'm already there. Sign me up. That sounds great. I'm on board for that one. So that answer works for me. And then the second one, whenever I travel, probably my favorite thing to do is to dive into the local cuisine, the local food and drink. I just love exploring that kind of stuff. So if you and I went out for a meal in Finland, what are we eating? What are we drinking? Is there any kind of traditional food or drink that I need to try that's a little bit different for me? I'd love to try anything. What kind of stuff do you got?
Maybe I wouldn't offer the most traditional ones to you, but then any type of fish is great. And then that would be easily provided we could fish from the lake and then fry the fish and eat it with some local beer.
Okay, I'm in for that. So we go fishing, we eat our dinner, we have a beer, and then we go sit in a sauna. I mean, this sounds like a perfect vacation. Whenever I can travel again, I'm putting Finland on the list, and I'm coming to visit you. So get ready. That sounds great. All right, well, Hanna-Kaisa, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for all of your support. I know me personally, I learned a lot just talking with you, and I'm sure our listeners did as well. So keep up the tremendous work. I hope one day we get to meet in person in a sauna and a beer. That sounds great. But in the meantime, keep up all the tremendous work. Let's stay in touch, and I hope we can do this again sometime soon.
Thanks, Brian. This has been great.
Well, that's it for today's show. Thanks for listening to the All Me podcast from the Taylor Hooton Foundation, a nonprofit organization leading a national campaign to enlighten people to the truths about appearance and performance-enhancing substances and inspiring people to live and compete without the use of these substances. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and tune in to our next episode.